What up, naughty steppers? It's Connor Whitmore here again with another review for you on the Nawtystep channel. And in today's video I'm going to be talking about the debut album from KOAN Sound, released on Shoshin Records, Polychrome. Bristol duo Weeks and Jim Bastow, aka KOAN Sound, are back with their first material in over 3 years. Apologies by the way if his surname is pronounced Bastow, I couldn't quite decide between the two. The last we saw of them being their Forgotten Myths EP from May 2015, released on Culprit's Open Outlets label. An EP that ended a run of consecutive releases across several years, from 2011's Max Out to Funkblaster, The Adventures of Mr. Fox, Sanctuary with Asa, Dynasty, and then Forgotten Myths in 2015. Starting out in the industrial realms of dubstep music, before revealing more intricate, detailed sides to their production, voyaging into glitch hop and NEUROFUNK, the two styles of music they are most renowned for today, and even dipping their toes into more orchestral, classical approaches, most notably in the Sanctuary project alongside Asa. Releasing on several labels through these musical transitions, including Skrillex's Owsla imprint for multiple years. Renowned for their ability to incorporate jazzy, funky elements into the weightiest slow-tempo beats, with tracks such as Mr. Brown, Funkblaster, and 80s Fitness completely taking the dark electronic music scene by storm in the early to mid-10s. Reimagining dubstep in this really groovy, organic way, full of bounce, personality, and character, and ultimately a welcome change from the influx of outright brutal brostep entering the EDM consciousness at that time. They had outright heavy tracks of their own, cuts like One Hand Clap and The Edge come to mind most, but more than anything I think they were championed for the flashiness and general good feeling that they were bringing to dark electronic music in abundance. The technicality and skill, moreover, in constructing said tunes being plain for anyone to hear. The articulation of every sound, both synths and percussion, being as staple an aspect of their aesthetic as the general feeling of it. Both Weeks and Bastow, to my knowledge, having their own respective mental health problems over the years and wanting to address them in the right way following the Forgotten Myths project, leading to them taking a little time out and finding the right balance between creativity and looking after themselves, all the while wanting their debut full-length LP to be as perfect as possible, taking time with every minute detail and not rushing it in any way. And so, a mighty 3 years later, we have the result of all that endeavour, Polychrome. An album that won't necessarily satisfy fans of their quirkiest, most exuberant songs, but which is executed with a precision and meticulousness that I'm not sure has been matched in dark electronic music for a long time. So much so that analysing the project becomes quite the difficult task, such is the immaculate detail of it. In turn, it's an album not so much of particular moments and sparks of brilliance, as much as it is one of continuation, scope, exploration, discovery. The detail being its main selling point, unravelling itself in front of you, endlessly evolving and mutating, without loads of emphasis on the element of surprise. That isn't to say, however, that Polychrome is without its individualities to really grab the attention across the 11 tracks. The introduction to the second track, Hustle Hammer, is a fantastic throwback to the classic Funkblaster, with those surging notes before the drop. A track possessing loads of neat background touches too. The snaking progression is very imagistic, furry sounds pattering and rippling through. Tune number 4, Chili Daddy, is an interesting quick time funk sort of number, the pace of which translates directly into the drops. The first of which is a frenetic amalgamation of sounds, whilst the second takes on a drum and bass structure and is equally as infused. Both drops here feeling a little held back and withdrawn in their delivery, yet they're so well assembled that that's what takes your attention most. The second drop in the penultimate track, Drift, is also of note, the percussive flow of which is noticeably more rhythmical than its predecessor. My favourite drop potentially on the whole album, however, arriving in the final track, The Zuller, with its first release, which takes the immaculate detail thing to another level entirely. The frothy washing sounds transport you instantly to a beach environment. It's so real. Elsewhere, with Hydroplane, we get the album's sole track that verges remotely on something resembling a banger. Mostly calm and collected, with hints of gruesomeness across both drops. Again, the feeling of withdrawal is strong, but it works better in this track. Tracks 5 and 7, Virtual Light and Prism Pulse respectively, I would single out for their snippets of excellence more than others here. The former, Virtual Light, follows a stunning underwater intro with the most effective and finely cut glitch breaks on the entire album, and the latter, Prism Pulse, has these beautiful shimmering parts, jumpy, feathery interjections amidst the gluey, muddy bass. So tidy. I must say, I also really enjoy the way this track kinda folds in on itself at the end, and those crackling sounds to finish. Top notch. Viridian Dream I love for its slight tempo change 3 minutes in. It's so subtle but so well managed, effortless and full of class. Whilst track 9, Zhongmyo, is a moment in itself within the context of the album, unique in how it develops. A stream of consciousness song that just builds and builds on the foundation established at the start, revealing more and more as it goes on. Like being in a new country and absorbing all the newness, sprouting in front of you as you travel from place to place, a sea of fresh opportunities and feelings. The tunes that I've omitted thus far, Cobalt and Chalk It Out, being much more about their general feeling than any specific moments per se. Cobalt is quite simply a very appropriate introduction in that it gives us an insight into the style and sounds we can expect from the following 10 tracks. And Chalk It Out is a super soothing, woozy summer vibe that is perhaps the closest we get to the KOAN Sound we know, as a combination of heavy, bouncy and groovy. But generally, I find myself wanting to talk about Polychrome more as a single entity and not in addressing the tracks individually. I mean, the way that several of them blend seamlessly into the next one speaks volumes for this. It's more one long listen than 11 separate songs, in my opinion. Moreover, because there is so much going on in each track, it becomes difficult to evaluate them as wholes. There are songs within each song. Leaving the insane amounts of detail to one side momentarily, there are multiple instances here of changing genre, tempo and feeling significantly, as I've just mentioned. An exceptional album in those respects, but not what many will have come for by any means. They're taking their own route by completely maturing their sound. If you're looking for their more playful side, then you won't find it here. Simplicity is key, and I think they run with that on Polychrome in its more toned down approach, but the result of this is that hardly any ideas are wowing me. Of course, the detail in this thing, as I've discussed already, is astonishing. There is absolutely no taking away from that fact. But when it comes to tracks like Hustle Hammer, Chili Daddy, Viridian Dream and Hydroplane, I think not so much about their detail, but more about the fact that their focal points, the drops, just feel so constrained, withdrawn and quelled. The way that I would put it being that there's a lot going on, but not much happening. The detail is there, but there's not a whole load of action or moments of inspiration. It is a masterpiece in that microscopic sense, but I don't find myself wanting to go back to it again and again because there's no big unleashing of feeling. There are moments, of course, thanks to this detail where I'm left wondering how they did that, but it's all sound design and not ideas based. I could talk for hours about many minute snippets here and how they're crafted, but whether they have a presence within the context of their tracks and the album overall is another question. The soundscapes are picturesque and the composition's impeccable, with each track telling its own story, but do they grip you? I'm not sure they do. I know vocals aren't really their thing, but it's the kind of element they could have included for their debut album to spice things up a bit. At 55 minutes, it's a slightly demanding project, being completely instrumental considering how overwhelmingly detailed it is, and vocals would have been something for listeners to cling on to every now and then to keep the listening experience of Polychrome ticking over. Without that, however, it's an album to marvel at and get lost in, as opposed to revel in and love for its individualities, in my opinion. Almost entrancing in its ability to make you forget about everything else that's going on around you, transfixed by its sonic journey, with the continuous track 9 Jongmyo being the undoubted epitome of this. Every cut here is jam-packed with an exceptional clarity and definition to every sound on show. The scenes they set are for the most part incredibly alive and vivid, each one being a real attack on the senses in its own way, begging the question repeatedly as to just how long it would take to make one of these tracks. Honestly, it's little surprise this thing is a 3-year construction in that sense. Weeks and Bastow have said that this is their biggest project so far, both in terms of quantity and complexity, the culmination of their ambition, which I think is fully reflected here. Not to mention the fact that a lot of the source material was recorded and not just plucked from sample banks. Listening like the inner workings of a clock or watch, or the cognition of machinery within this natural setting, creating this wonderful juxtaposition between machine and nature along the way, the theme of the album that I take to be its most significant. But in doing all of this, I feel it neglects the idea aspect too much, experimental to the point that a lot of it sounds like a live band just having a bit of fun, a little jam, and it needs a bit of variation in terms of track presentation to be great in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, it is one of the most remarkably constructed EDM albums I've ever heard, but in going off in so many directions, I think it lacks cohesion beyond its detail, a whirlwind of ideas being thrown together, as opposed to a few becoming focal for their respective tracks. Resultantly, at points it seems unsure and caught in between two desires, most clear for me in Virtual Light, Hydroplane and Drift. Virtual Light in particular is both gloomy and hopeful, the emotional balance of it being on point initially, yet by the end you're left wondering which one it's really going for. And in conclusion, there is no outlandish statement-making track here that really seizes Polychrome by the horns, but maybe that's the point. KOAN Sound have discovered an art in going off on so many different tangents without a clear end goal in mind, something they're clearly running with here, and if that's what they wanted, then it's worked 100%. It may be a different approach to what we're used to from them, but that's to be expected with artistry. It's all about evolution. And you know, if it takes a few more listens for me and others to really get into it, then so be it. I mean, their artistic choices should be respected and appreciated. I personally am excited to listen to it without having to figure out what works and just immerse myself in it, because on reflection, this album is quite the journey. A serious departure from what made them so popular, the overtly jovial side of their production being sapped from it almost entirely. Yet it's because of this that the remarkable productive skill shines through, and it's that aspect that makes the truest statement here. Now, in terms of my favourite from Polychrome, then I think I would have to go either with Hustle Hammer or the Zuller. The former I find to bear the closest semblance to KOAN Sound of old, but as a representation of the incredible detail this album provides, I'd have to go with the closing track, and especially the first drop and outro, Stunning stuff. And in terms of recommendations, if you enjoyed this album, then I would look at Underscores, Rat-a-tat, and Info Kill. And so that is that for another review on the Nawtystep channel, this time of the debut album from KOAN Sound, released on Shoshin Records, Polychrome. Thank you very much, and as always, for tuning in. Be sure to leave a comment with your thoughts on Polychrome. What did you guys make of it? Do you have a favourite track from the 11? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, then be sure to give it a big old thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hitting the notification bell along the way. For some other album reviews on the channel, check out the link next to my head somewhere. Don't forget to like and follow Nawtystep across social media if you haven't already, all of which is linked, including the recommendations, in the description box down below. And lastly, if it's naughty, then you know guys, so be sure as always to keep it naughty and stay safe. And I shall see all of you legends in the next one. Peace out.